In order to explicitly control the this keyword and overcome some of the problems we just looked at, there are three methods provided in JavaScript, specifically call, apply, and bind. Now, we're going to talk about call and apply first, as they are very similar to one another, and we will deal with bind in the next topic. Now, before we talk about how to control the object referenced by the keyword this, let's first look at these commands and how to use them. Both of these commands are simply another way to invoke a function. Let's look at that. All right, so let's say I have a function test. It's just going to log to the console the word test. That's all we're doing here. So I have this function set up, and obviously one way to invoke that is simply type the name of the function and then use parentheses to invoke it. So if we save that, let me just reduce this here and go to the console again, we can see that it displays test on the console. So that's one way to invoke a function, but there are other ways we can do that, and that's using call and apply. So let's look at both of those. So here's how we would invoke test using call. Dot call and then parens. And basically that's going to accomplish the exact same thing as invoking test. We're just invoking that function with call, and we can do the same thing with apply. Comment out this one up here, and there we get test showing up. So that's the first thing to know about these commands, is they're simply another way to invoke a function. And that part of it is pretty simple, really. But let's now look at how it can control the keyword this, because that's really what we want to do with them, is we want to be able to control the keyword this. So let's go ahead and set up an object again. I'm going to comment this out. Same object we had previously. It's got a name property that I had set to my name, and then we had a display name function, if you remember. Display name method, and basically what that did is that just logged to the console this.name. Like that. All right, so that was the object that we have. And now let's set up a second object. We'll call it obj2. This one will be much simpler. Basically, it's only going to have a name property, Lynette. That's all it will have. Now, looking at these two objects, could we borrow the method from obj1, this method right here? Or obj, I mean. Could we borrow the method from obj to use with obj2? Now think about this concept in a wider application with your JavaScript development. If we can borrow methods, it prevents the repeating of code. The whole dry principle that we talk about a lot. Don't repeat yourself. Don't write the same code more than once. Well, if we can borrow a method from an object and use with another object, then that will help us not to repeat code. So we can do that with call and apply. Let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to scroll down here a bit so we can see both of those and these commands. So first off, if I do obj.displayName, if I just invoke that and save that, we get Steve. Now, if I did the same thing with call, what do we get? Whoops, notice the error. I did that wrong. Don't want to invoke it with the parens. I want to invoke it with call. Notice what we get here as an error. Cannot read property name of undefined. So what happened there? What happened when we used call to invoke that function? Well, what call and apply are doing are they are setting the reference object for this. But we didn't pass anything in to do that. And so that's why we're getting that error. But we could set the reference object to obj2. And let's go ahead and do that now. So if I put obj2 right here and save that, now notice what we get. We get Lynette showing. And so basically, when it invokes that method, the this now points to obj2 because that's what I established as the reference for the keyword this. I established it by using call and passing in an object that will be used for this. Now, the same thing can be done with apply. So if I were to copy this here and enter apply, I'll comment out this one and save that, we still get Lynette. So that is how we can explicitly set the value of this. And this is going to help us overcome some of those problems we were talking about. Now, before we continue on though, we need to talk about what the difference is between these two commands. Right now, they look to be doing exactly the same thing. So in order to illustrate the difference, I want to do something. I'm going to modify this method up here. I'm going to add 2 parentheses, greet and punct. So greet is just something we'll pass in that will be a greeting for the name, and then punctuation will come at the end, whatever punctuation we want at the end. Okay. Now, using these 2 commands, we'll do call first. We are invoking the display method using call and setting the reference object for this to obj2. But how do we handle these parameters? Well, with the call method, those parameters come after the object that we pass in for the keyword this. So let's go ahead and pass in a hi. And we'll also pass in a punctuation mark here. I'm going to do an exclamation point. So now when we save this, and I come up here and continue to modify this, I forgot a piece. Put a space in between the greeting and the name, and then we'll also concatenate on the end here, punct. Okay, there we go. Now we will save it, and now we see hi Lynette with exclamation point after it. I guess I didn't need to put the space here because I put it down here. There we go. Now, that is call. And so when we're passing in parameters using call, we just continue to list them after the object and separate them with a comma. We passed in 2 here. You can see how we did that. Now, let's look at how we would do that with apply. This is where the difference occurs between these 2 methods. With apply, we pass the parameters in as a part of an array. So they need to be in an array. So we would do it like this. Set up an array here, and we're going to pass in, let's do hello, and then let's do just a period, like that as our second parameter. And so you can see the difference. The parameters here are inside an array, the parameters here are not. So really whether you use call or apply depends on how you want to pass in parameters. That's really the only difference. So if we save this now, we see hello Lynette, and there's a period at the end. So both call and apply allow us to establish the object that's referenced using the keyword this, and they can pass in parameters. Call does it by just separating those parameters with a comma. Apply does it in an array. Now, we need to look at bind before we start looking at how to fix the problems we encountered in the previous topic. So let's do that in the next topic.